جمعوا جميع الرجال والتلاميذ الكبار هم في التيل. أول يوم ثاني يوم مات واحد.
So you were trying to resist the British and they shot you for this?
They shot me.
They came with 30 other people from the nearby village and they put them on the bus and they forced the driver to drive on the second mine.
We went in and I remember we had lighted braziers and we set the houses on fire and we burnt the village to the ground.
A guardian of law and order looks out over the old walled city of Jerusalem.
This is the story of what the 1930s newsreels didn't show. A history of abuses inflicted by Britain in Palestine, and an attempt by Palestinians today to get the government to answer for them.
Yet so careful has Britain's army been to avoid unnecessary violence.
You have to look hard to find Al-Basa, all that remains of a Palestinian village in what became northern Israel. It was destroyed in the year the state was created. So much of the history just feels lost, really. I mean, this destruction, these ruins, are from the War of 1948. And it was a decade earlier that the British were here and attacked and burned down houses. In 1938, after 4 of their troops were killed by a roadside bomb, the British machine-gunned Al-Basa and then carried out a massacre. Men were herded onto a bus and blown up by a landmine, leaving many dead, their remains buried in a pit.
My father, he was afraid because, as he says, they strip people naked in front of everyone, and this is very shameful in our tradition, and they tortured them.
Eid Haddad is a Palestinian refugee now in Denmark. His parents survived but never forgot the British attack on their village.
It's something which tells the story which has never been told. I always wondered why people never talk about what happened in Al-Basa. And I wanted people to know that my parents, as teenagers, they suffered. And people have to know what happened. And those who died, we have to speak for them now.
Armored cars with reinforced screens patrol the road from Jerusalem.
Violence between Palestinians and Jews was spiralling in the 30s. Britain struggled to contain an insurgency, the Arab Rebellion. Its response was brutal. Whole Palestinian villages were told they'd be punished for the crimes of the few.
It went from here and it went from there.
So you were a 13-year-old boy shot then. I mean, what happened after that?
The whole town came to see me in the hospital. I was a hero.
Munib al-Masri is heading the call for the UK government to apologise for alleged war crimes against Palestinians. He invites me to his mansion in Nablus. It's part home, part museum to a Palestinian past often forgotten. So you've got all the decades here of national aspiration.
Yes.
He made his fortune as an oil tycoon, but started life resisting the British and got a bullet in the leg to show for it. He remembers how his father was targeted by the soldiers.
Middle of the night, they would say, Rashid, where is Rashid? And Rashid, my father, will come and see them and say, okay, come with us, we need to take you to interrogate you. And this kept on for maybe a few years, doing the same thing. And then at the age of, when he was 52, 53 years old, he died. He died. My mother blamed the British soldiers because they harassed him too much.
You know, there'll be people who say, this is all in the past, this was 100 years ago, this kind of thing just antagonises the situation. So I wonder, do you see this as part of a process that will help?
During the British Mandate, people being deported, people being harassed, people being beaten. the houses being destroyed, crops being burned. Why it didn't happen to us to say sorry? Sorry means a lot of things. I mean, sorry to be followed by what can we do to amend our mistakes. So I think Britain should be brave to say, sorry, I did this, like they did in other countries.
In the Rome Statute,
Al-Masri says he's appointed an independent review of the evidence. The team meets at his home in Nablus. They include a former chief prosecutor at the International Criminal Court, as well as this leading British human rights barrister.
As for the crimes, I mean, they speak for themselves. They are, some of them, of such enormous gravity that they would have been regarded even then as breaches of custom international, or crimes that are a shock to the conscience of the British nation. And that obviously constitutes a clear violation of the United Kingdom's duty towards the Palestinian population.
We used to go out before dawn, ring the village, tell them that nobody was to leave, and if anybody left, they were shot.
These are the voices of British soldiers recorded decades later. The tapes reveal accounts of arbitrary killings, collective punishment and torture.
We'd go down to Acre jail and borrow, say, 5 rebels, 3 rebels, and you sit them on the bonnet so that the guy up in the hill could see an Arab on the truck, so he wouldn't blow it. But if he was unlucky, the truck behind, coming up behind, would hit him. But nobody bothered to unpick the bits up. They were left.
Turn out and maybe go search a village, maybe a punitive expedition, and smash up a few houses, things like that.
Were you under orders to smash up the house?
Oh yes, punitive.
What was the reaction of the villagers?
They didn't like it.
We all gathered round and they stood and formed 2 lines of men. Some with pickaxes, like pickaxe halves. Some with bayonet scabbards, with a bayonet inside. Some with the rifles. Whatever was there. And the rebels were sent one at a time through this, what do you call it, gauntlet. And they were belted and bashed until they got to the other end. Now, any that died, they went into the other meat wagon and they were dumped at one of the villages on the outside.
The British had gone into Palestine expecting that sort of British rule, British justice would prevail, and they were very taken aback when they found that that didn't happen and that they couldn't prevail upon the Arabs and the Jews to live side by side. So for them, in a sense, it was it was a real challenge to their whole idea of what they were doing there, and that provoked an increasingly violent response.
Here in Halhul, in the occupied West Bank, you won't find plaques or memorials. There have been too many traumas to count in the years since Britain left for that. It was the summer of 1939 when Black Watch troops surrounded the village and soldiers stormed in. The British were determined to find guns. They rounded up the men of Halhul and brought them here to a space behind a mosque. They forced men into cages. And the planes circled the village, a common tactic at the time to target anyone who might try and run away. Nidal's father was a baby when the troops came, and he lost his own father in the atrocity.
My grandfather was died on the 12th day of the gauge.
He died on the 12th day?
Yes.
Nidal's grandfather was among dozens of men kept for up to 2 weeks in the cages in the sweltering heat. Up to 14 people died at the hands of the British here, most of them of dehydration in captivity.
It's very terrible for him. He lived without father all his life. You know what's mean without your father? Nothing. No one gives you money, no one gives you food. You live alone.
There's evidence this was a routine practice, setting up cages. Here there were 2, a so-called good cage and a bad cage. What happened in Halhul was described in an extraordinary account decades later by a British commanding officer there.
In the bad cage, which was adjacent, they had no shelter. They were rationed to, I think, 1 pint of water a day, half a pint in the morning and half a pint in the evening. The idea was that, and they were told, that if they had a rifle, that if they gave it up or took us to this rifle or this weapon, whatever it may be, they would be put in the good cage.
Mohammed was a boy and remembers the soldiers occupying his rooftop.
أنا كنت طفل لاعي يعني ليش الإنجليز جايين على بيتنا؟ بيت طابقين قديم جدا عند حرم النبي يونس. جمعوا جميع الرجال والتلاميذ الكبار والشباب في منطقة كانت مزروعة كرم عنب. هذول ما كانوا ثوار، كانوا مزارعين. الثوار وين كانوا؟ في الجبال. طيب هم في التيل، بعدين صاروا يموتوا من الأرض، بعدين صاروا يبحثوا في التراب للجذور وأكلوهن ويحطوا التراب الرطب على وجوههم وعلى عينيهم بالشكل هذا. مات مجموعة.
He's written extensively about the killing in the cages, from testimony of the survivors and relatives of the dead. How did this leave everyone remaining in the village feeling? What was the impact over time from this event?
ولازم رفعنا قضية في هذاك الوقت لو كنا متعلمين، لو كان في إعلام. طلع اسمه التيل، هو يعني مأساة. حتى أنا سميته في كتابي مأساة حلحول. مأساة إنه راحوا هذول، صاروا النسوان والذام وهم يغنوا في الحصيد ويغنوا في كذا، يحكوا زي قصائد شعرية نثرية على اللي ماتوا في سنة التيل.
Palestinians and Israelis view the British legacy from very different positions. 3 decades after its pledge for a Jewish homeland, the UK knew war was coming to Palestine, and both communities had felt Britain's broken promises.
After the Holocaust, the tension between the Zionists and the British increased very badly, and so historically you might say that the British sometimes were quite nasty to both Jews and Arabs. They were very tough rulers, and what they wanted was be quiet. Don't bother us with your problems.
This is me. I was 3 months old.
Yeah.
And these are my sisters and my mother.
Back in Al-Basa, I walk with Halhul. He was a baby when the British stormed his family's village here. 10 years later, they were made refugees, like 700,000 other Palestinians who fled or were forced from their homes in the war surrounding Israel's creation.
My house was here in this place.
Just over here?
Yeah.
And now?
Now there's no houses and nothing.
What does it feel like when you come back here?
Very sad.
In what way? Explain. You can describe.
I can't describe.
No.
I told you, I can't express my feeling. I can't. And sometimes I begin to cry. Let's go. Continue.
In a statement, the Ministry of Defence said it was aware of historical allegations and would review any evidence thoroughly. I mean, that is why it's been hard actually researching this story, often to find the descendants of people who have the memories of what happened here, because their homes were destroyed in 1948 and then the community was scattered. And I think that's one of the key reasons why the people bringing the case feel that the British government owes this debt to the Palestinians because what happened here has never been accounted for. There is an argument that all of this should be laid to rest, that like the ruins of Al-Basa, underlying it are remnants of British rule, the ghosts of imperialism. But those requesting the acknowledgement argue it matters still. It reopens the debate over bringing modern-day accountability for colonial-era crimes, and that recognising the injustice of the past can help bring better solutions to it today.